trying to get this up. So we're fortunate to have a member of CoCard on
So what you get,
security council.
and that's the cover for it.
And so I asked Hunter to give us, and most of this can apply to almost all of us now. We happen to know this information. I asked our resident expert, we're very fortunate, like I said before, to have this person. He just got back from Amsterdam, London. Now that he's on this council, they fly him all over the world to get the latest, greatest stuff on something that most of us are pretty naive about. I learned the hard way. I'm not naive anymore, let me tell you. I won't go into that. It's another story over drinks. But I'd like to welcome Hunter up. Why don't you give us a little update, Hunter? Thank you for all you do and other stuff, RSPA chair. Give us some good info.
Thanks, Dan.
Let's give him a hand.
So one of the things that I do spend some of my time on is dealing with data security and PCI compliance topics. And so Dan asked to share just a few minutes of updates and information on that. So I have a couple slides we can run through pretty quickly, and then if there are any questions, we can certainly open up the floor. So why is security important? So we all certainly make our money off of merchant processing. The basis of people or consumers feeling comfortable using credit cards is confidence in the payment system. And so when you do see scenarios where there are significant breaches, that degrades consumer confidence, and that can degrade decline card usage, which can result in less revenue for us. So it is generally important for us to make sure that we do what we can to keep the system secure. A data breach is damaging to merchants. Just a show of hands, how many people in here have had a merchant that has experienced a data breach? So there are some of us. And so that does create pain and suffering for the merchant. When there is a loss, a financial loss, one of the things that a merchant will typically do is start looking around to see if anybody else is going to help them out with that loss. And so that can mean somebody looking at making a claim against anybody, whether that be a POS provider, a merchant provider, somebody that was involved that they think may have been in fault, as well as if the merchant it goes out of business, then certainly there's the loss of the residual associated with that account. And I'd like to make a note about the difference between compliance versus security. So one of the things that I've learned that the PCI data security standards that exist today really have generally been written by really smart people that really write them in almost a vacuum, where they set up a standard that they think that if somebody complies with that standard, there's no way that they can be breached. These guys, they have a saying that sort of is that, our standard has never failed us, because every time there's been a breach, the forensic investigators have found out they were non-compliant in some way, okay? And so that, I am happy to report that the PCI Council as a whole is becoming more receptive to understanding the real world challenges that are faced for merchants to become compliant, and they're attempting to make that easier. But the important thing is that the primary goal in not being breached is that you have security. And so that can differ a little bit from compliance. Somebody that is truly 100% compliant, it is highly unlikely that they will breach. They are very secure. But somebody that is not compliant can still be secure, and they can still be protected against having those losses and those claims. What we do see, one of the challenges on compliance is that when you look at a self-assessment questionnaire, many merchants don't understand the questionnaires, and we call it, searching for green. They just hit check boxes and they click buttons until they get all green, and they can hit next at the bottom of the page, which that is not even compliance, and that is not even security.
It's not.
Okay?
It's not.
So, at the council level, there's a lot of discussion about where the attacks are coming from. There are three primary areas of focus that they talk a lot about these days. So the first one is around patch management. different software solutions, making sure that as a vendor releases a security patch, that patch is applied. It can be at the operating system level, it can be at the application level. That has a significant presence in e-com on shopping carts, that they'll find a breach in a shopping cart, and then, or they'll find a security vulnerability in a shopping cart, the vendor will patch that, but individual merchants will never get to the point of applying that patch, so they become exposed. Password control is a big piece of it. We'll talk a little bit more about passwords later. And then remote access, that traditionally is used for support purposes to allow other people into the environment to do things that have legitimate business needs to do. I'm sure everybody has heard, one of the very big breaches that occurred, one of the primary methods that the attacker or the breacher got into the network was through access from an HVAC company. Okay, and so where those doors are for remote access, they need to be closed or secured. So there is a solution to that, and it is a role that we can play to help solve the problem, and that's called devaluing the data. And I like to explain this as, if you want to stop bank robberies, just don't store cash in banks, right? There's no money in the bank, who's going to rob the bank? So it's relatively the same concept for what we're trying to do, is if we can take that cardholder data and make it of no value to a third party, then there will be no basis or reason for them to breach the system. And so that is typically all based around encrypting the data so that the data cannot be used, and there are three solutions to do that. So if you're not familiar, at the highest level, there's what's called a point-to-point encrypted validated solution. And there is a list of these solutions on the PCI Council website. And when they become validated, they go to a testing certification process where it's tested from end to end to make sure that there is no data of value anywhere in that transaction process that any hacker or malicious person can compromise. Now, with that said, today, that point-to-point encrypted validated solution is very hard to achieve. There are a lot of challenges around custody of the devices, who has the opportunity to tamper with something or change that. So there are individual pieces of the solution that are available. So you could have a card reader that is a point-to-point encrypted card reader, and that will give you some level of protection, a significant level of protection, but it may not reach the full validated solution. And then the last one I'd like to make note of, particularly for people that are deploying terminal devices, the best thing that you need to look for on a terminal device is that it is an SRED certified terminal, and that the application that you are using on that terminal is using the SRED functionality of it. For a true P2PE solution, it is going to be using that, but you'll start to see, you can talk to PACs, other people are coming out with the current SRED certifications, but if the application doesn't use it, then you're not getting the protection. Yes?
How do we know it's an SRED terminal?
You have to talk to the terminal manufacturer. They should have a data sheet that will tell you what level of security compliance it has. And so you'll want to look both at, is the terminal SRED certified, as well as is the application that you're running on it. Okay, and you'll see differentiation. In my world, I use a PAX SV30, and there are some models of that are SRED. The newer 3.0 certified ones are, the older 2.1 ones are not. And so do look at your terminals for that certification. It secures the card data at the actual swipe of the card.
What is that acronym?
Secure read and encryption data standard device. So another part of the solution is QIR certification. The PCI Council has released a educational and certification program designed specifically for people like us, and that's both POS people and terminal providers, that's designed to train you and provide you with information that helps you secure the merchant environment, the cardholder data environment. It provides relevant staff training on key topics. Visa, they require it at the merchant level. Visa issued a mandate a while ago that directed all merchants to use QIR certified companies and personnel for deployment and support of their payment systems. MasterCard is introducing the requirement at their terminal servicer level. As you go through the terminal servicer program or registration process, that is one of the steps of that process. It's 1 hour online training follow computer-based training, so somebody can sit in your office and you can say, look, take an hour this morning, I want you to go through this training. They take a short test, I think it's 30 questions. The cost is only $100. If you're looking for ways to get people trained and knowledgeable about security, it's a great program to take advantage of, and it does have requirements. We haven't seen any enforcement yet, either from Visa or MasterCard, in the way that they're requiring it, but they do have those requirements out there. So the last thing I want to just spend a couple quick minutes talking about is for each of us about our individual businesses. The hackers of the world are realizing, the criminals of the world are realizing that we are high-value targets, okay? They're just, this on the right there, on October 3rd, the Department of Homeland Security issued a specific alert that advanced persistent threat activity exploiting managed service providers, okay? People that are servicing payment systems, they are a target for hackers. There are a couple of things that all of us should be thinking about as we're running our businesses. If you don't know what phishing is, you should become aware of it. Phishing is when somebody sends an email to you or your employees with the intent of getting them to take an action, typically to click on a link in an email, okay? Lewis is putting his head in his hands over there because my staff, not an hour ago, one of my staff clicked on a phishing link. Okay? So as much as we try to defend against it, it does occur because it's human nature. We'll talk a little bit more about that. What is important to understand is the difference between phishing and spear phishing. Hackers are getting so good at the social engineering part that they will send an email to somebody, to you or somebody on your team, that will totally, at first glance, look legitimate. It'll say, hey, it's Hunter, I'm in Florida to my bookkeeper, and I'll say, listen, I need you to transfer $10,000 here, and please do that. There's stories I know, one of the motivational speakers that I've known and speak to on a regular basis, he lost $400,000 because he was speaking in Russia, and hackers hacked his email, they learned his writing style, they learned who the bookkeeper was in his business. You go to LinkedIn, you put in the business name, you can really quickly figure out who the bookkeeper of the business is. And they wrote an email that said, hey, I'm in a rush, I'm in Russia, the time difference is off, I need you to send $400,000 right away to this account. Boom, gone. Okay? Many people have that. So it's important to be careful about that. So some suggestions on what you can do. So the first one is, in terms of passwords, I said we're going to come back to passwords. So in passwords, length matters. Okay? How many people have a password that is probably about 5 or 6 letters, first of all, that start with a capital, and then it's got a couple of numbers, 2 or 4 numbers, and then it might have like an exclamation point, or if you're really odd, maybe it's got like a % sign at the end of it. Anybody have a password like that? Okay? So I have seen a presentation like this where a group of people made up a totally random password. Okay, you give me a letter, you give me a letter, you give me a number, you give me a symbol, and then the guy that was standing here that had the hacker code ran his program on it, 37 seconds to crack that password. 37 seconds. Okay? So in passwords, the most important thing these days is length. If you can get over 37 characters in your password, that's when it starts to be a good password. Okay? But I'll tell you what the good or the upside of that is it doesn't matter if there are letters or there are words in there that are easy for you to remember. So a password that, Dan Bratlin is a big tuna is not a bad password.
I like it.
Okay? So, and where there is a need for numbers or special characters, if you can put them somewhere in the middle, that's a strong password. Okay? And make it 3 or 4 words strung together that are easy for you to remember, and that these days is the best password. But even better than passwords is wherever you have a chance to use multi-factor authentication, you should use that, where it will send a one-time code to your cell phone. Okay? A note on multi-factor authentication, don't just have it send you an email. If somebody cracks your email and then it sends the one-time password to your email, now they've got both factors and they can log in. So the most frequent way to use a multi-factor authentication is to have it sent to your phone and you get a one-time password. A multi-factor component would be biometrics, if you're using a thumbprint or something like that as well. Cover the basics, make sure that you're using commercial firewalls in your business, make sure that you have antivirus software in place. And then the last one, this one is the one that is killing me at this particular moment of the day, is train your staff. They are the last line of defense, okay? And so I had, here's my story, and I'm very aware of this. We had a bookkeeper that got a phishing email, came from an accountant that I had not used in probably 5 years. The email said, hey, I need to send you these files or download these files, click here, they're important. And my bookkeeper clicked on the link and it brought her up and it asked for her username and password for her email, and she compromised her email there. And so half an hour later, she sort of said, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And so we caught that in time before there was any big damage. But then we had a big team meeting October 2nd. Today is what, the 18th? Okay, 16 days. And I said, great, guys, we're all in the room, guys and girls, we're all in the room here. And so we're going to take a minute and talk about security. And we're going to talk about phishing. And we're going to talk about don't you dare click on a link in an email. And here's 3 or 4 ways to see if it's valid or not. And so then, again, about an hour ago, one of the administrative people in my office clicked on a link. The good news of it was she clicked on the link and then she said, ooh, beep, okay? And she immediately understood that she needed to unplug that computer from the network, get it offline. We quarantine the computer, we get a replacement computer in there, and we have processes in place to contain that. But if you think that your staff won't do this, think again. Right? And then the last item that I have here is cover your behind. There's going to be some presentations this afternoon about some of the insurance and merchant protection products. You should think about in your business making sure that you have a cyber policy in place. If you're performing services for merchants where you think if you or your staff might do something wrong and that could result in a loss for the merchant, you should look at an errors and omissions policy. That's an E&O policy is listed up there. Those you'll have to talk to the insurance company and they'll need to understand some specifics about your business to be able to quote that. And then the last one is be aware. I like to phrase this as, if it's 9 o'clock at night and you're walking through sort of a sketchy part of town, you have a degree of awareness. You're aware of who's around you, you're aware if anybody's following you behind. That's my suggestion on how you approach security. Be aware of what's going on out there and be as careful as you can not to let it happen to you. And so with that, maybe just a minute if there's a question.
Go back one slide.
That was the question.
All right, thank you very
Some
much.
good info. That's some great info. Thank you, Hunter. Good work. Get some sleep. Jet lag. That actually leads into our next presenter.